Resident Evil, Book 3, City of the Dead. Written by S.D. Perry, narrated and voice acted by Kenny Rutter. Prologue. Raccoon Times, August 26, 1998. Mayor announces Keep City Safe plan. Raccoon City. On the front steps of City Hall, Mayor Harris announced in a press conference yesterday afternoon that the City Council will be hiring at least 10 new police officers to join the Raccoon Police, in response to the continued suspension of the Special Tactics and Rescue Squad, S.T.A.R.S, in effect since the brutal murders that plagued Raccoon earlier this summer. Joined by Police Chief Brian Irons and all of Raccoon's council members, Harris assured the gathered citizens and reporters that Raccoon City will once again be a safe community in which to live and work, and that the investigation into the 11 cannibal murders and 3 fatal wild animal attacks is far from closed. Just because no one else has been attacked in the last month doesn't mean that the elected officials of the city can relax, Harris stated. The good people of Raccoon deserve to have confidence in their police force and to be secure in the knowledge that their political representatives are doing everything possible to ensure each citizen's safety. As many of you know, the S.T.A.R.S suspension is likely to become permanent. That unit's gross mishandling of the murder investigations and its subsequent disappearance from Raccoon City suggests that they don't care about this community. But I want to assure you that we care, that myself, Chief Irons, and the men and women you see here today want nothing more than to make Raccoon a place in which our children can grow up without fear. Harris went on to detail a 3-point plan designed to bolster public confidence and keep Raccoon citizens from falling victim to violence. Besides hiring between 10 and 12 new police officers, the citywide curfew will remain in place through at least September, and Chief Irons will personally head a task force of several officers and detectives to continue searching for the killers who took the lives of 11 people between May and July of this year. Cityside, September 4th, 1998. Renovation of Umbrella Complex planned. Raccoon City. The Umbrella chemical plant just south of downtown Raccoon is due for major construction efforts, slated to begin next Monday. This will be the third such structural renovation in the last year for the thriving pharmaceutical company. According to Umbrella spokesperson Amanda Whitney, 2 of the laboratories inside the main plant will be fitted with several $1 million worth of new equipment designed for vaccine synthesis, and the building itself will receive a state-of-the-art security system. In addition, all of the connected office buildings will be upgrading computers over the next several weeks. But will this be a problem for the downtown traffic? Said Whitney, with the Raccoon Police Building just finishing up yet another one of their renovations, we know that local commuters are getting pretty tired of blocked streets. We're going to do our best not to get in the way of downtown traffic. Most of the construction is internal, and the rest we'll be doing after business hours. The courtyard in front of the RPD building, our readers may remember, was recently repaved and landscaped after several mysterious cracks appeared in the cement and topsoil. Traffic had to be diverted around 2 blocks of Oak Street for 6 days. When asked why so many overhauls as of late, Whitney replied, "Umbrella has stayed ahead of the competition for as long as it has by keeping up with current technology. It's going to be a busy couple of months, but I think it will be well worth the effort when we're finally through." Raccoon Weekly Editorial, September 17th, 1998. Irons to run? Raccoon City. Mayor Harris may be in for a rough race next spring. Weekly sources inside the RPD are saying that Brian Irons, chief of police for the last 4.5 years, may be running for the city's top office in the next election, facing off against the popular and as yet unopposed Devlin Harris, already in office for 3 consecutive terms. Although Irons will not confirm his possible entry into the political arena, the one-time S.T.A.R.S member also refused to deny the rumor. With his approval rating at an all-time high ever since the cessation of this summer's savage murders, as yet unsolved, and the planned expansion of the RPD, Chief Irons may indeed be the man to knock Harris out of City Hall. The question is, will voters be able to forget Irons' alleged involvement in the 1994 Cider District land scam? Or his rather expensive tastes in art and interior design, which have turned parts of the RPD building into something more like a museum than a working office? Assuming he means to throw his hat into the ring, this reporter, for one, will be looking forward to examining Irons' financial records. Raccoon Times, September 22nd, 1998. Teenager attacked in City Park. Raccoon City. At approximately 6:30 p.m. last night, 14-year-old Shanna Williamson was accosted by a mysterious stranger in downtown's Birch Street Park on the way home from softball practice. The man came out from behind a row of hedges at the south end of the park and knocked Miss Williamson off her bicycle before attempting to grab her. The teenager managed to get away with only a few scratches, running into the nearby residence of Tom and Clara Atkins. Mrs. Atkins alerted the authorities, who conducted a thorough search of the park but found no sign of the attacker. According to the girl, through a police statement issued earlier this morning, the man appeared to be a transient. His clothes and hair were dirty, and she described a bad odor coming from him, like a smell of rotten fruit. She also said that he seemed drunk, staggering and falling after her as she ran. With the plague of cannibalistic murders from May to July still unsolved, the RPD is taking Miss Williamson's encounter very seriously. The assailant bears a striking resemblance to eyewitness reports of the gang member spotted in Victory Park last June. Mayor Harris has called a press conference for later today, and police chief Brian Irons has stated already that with the first of the newly hired police officers expected next week, regular patrols will extend their routes to include the downtown park blocks. Chapter 1. September 26, 1998. With the guys waiting outside in Barry's truck, Jill did her best to hurry. It wasn't easy. The house had been tossed since the last time she'd been there. The floors were strewn with books and papers, and it was too dark to navigate around the debris easily. That her small home had been violated was upsetting, though not much of a surprise. She figured she should just be thankful that she wasn't really the sentimental type, and that the intruders hadn't managed to find her passport. She grabbed random handfuls of clean socks and underwear in the cramped darkness of the bedroom and stuffed them deep into her weathered backpack, wishing she could turn on the light. Packing a bag in the dark was harder than it sounded, would be even if one's house hadn't been trashed, but she knew they couldn't afford to take any chances. It was unlikely that Umbrella still had all of their houses staked out, but if there was anyone watching, a light in the window could draw fire. At least you're getting out. No more hiding. There was that much. They were headed for foreign soil to storm enemy headquarters and very likely get killed in the process. But at least she wouldn't have to hang out in Raccoon anymore. And for what she'd read in the papers lately, maybe that was for the best. 2 attacks in the last week. Chris and Barry were skeptical about the danger, even knowing what the T-virus did to people. Barry thought it was some kind of PR stunt, that Umbrella would rescue Raccoon before anyone got hurt. Chris agreed, insisting that Umbrella wanted crap in their own backyard, so to speak, what with the Spencer estate disaster so recent. But Jill wasn't prepared to assume anything. Umbrella had already proven that they couldn't contain their research. And with what Rebecca and David Trapp's team had faced in Maine, now wasn't the time to think about that. They had a plane to catch. Jill scooped the flashlight off the dresser and was about to head for the living room when she remembered that she only had one bra with her. Scowling, she turned back to the open drawers and started to dig. She had enough clothing already, chosen from what Brad had left behind when he'd fled Raccoon. She and the guys had been holed up in his vacant house for several weeks, ever since Umbrella had hit Barry's house. And although none of Brad's stuff fit Chris's tall frame or Barry's massive one, she'd been able to make do. Lingerie, however, wasn't something the S.T.A.R.S pilot had stocked up on. She didn't particularly want to hop off the plane in Austria and have to go bra shopping. Vanity, thy name is under wire. She found the elusive article only after she'd gone through the drawer twice and crammed it into the bag as she jogged towards the small front room of the rented house. It was only the second time she'd been there since they'd gone into hiding. She had the feeling she might not be coming back for a while. There was a picture of her father on one of the bookshelves that she wanted to take. Stepping nimbly through the dark clutter, she hooded the flashlight with one hand and trained the narrow beam at the corner where the shelf had been. The Umbrella team had knocked the whole thing over, but apparently hadn't bothered to go through the books themselves. God only knew what they'd been looking for in the first place. Clues as to where the renegade S.T.A.R.S were hiding, probably. After the attack at Barry's house and the disastrous mission at Caliban Cove, she no longer had any illusions about Umbrella simply ignoring them. Jill spotted the book she wanted, a rather lurid-looking paperback entitled Prison Life. Her father would have laughed. She picked it up and rifled through the pages, stopping when the light fell across Dick Valentine's crooked grin. He'd sent the pictures along with one of his more recent letters, and she tucked it into the book so that she wouldn't lose it. Hiding important things was a habit she'd gotten into young, one that had just paid off yet again. She let the book drop, the need to hurry suddenly forgotten as she gazed down at the photo. A faint smile played across her lips. He was probably the only man she knew of who looked good in the bright orange jumpsuit of a maximum security pen. For just a moment, she wondered what he'd think of her current predicament. In a roundabout way, he was responsible, at least for getting her involved with the S.T.A.R.S in the first place. After he'd been sent up, he'd urged her to get out of the business, even saying that he'd been wrong to train her as a thief. So I'd take a legit job, actually working for society instead of against it, and people in Raccoon start dying. The S.T.A.R.S uncover a conspiracy to create bioweapons with a virus that turns living things into monsters. Obviously, no one believes us. The S.T.A.R.S that can't be bought by Umbrella are either discredited or eliminated. So we go underground, try to dig up proof, and come up empty-handed as Umbrella continues to screw around with their dangerous research, and more good people are killed. Now we're off on what will probably be a suicide mission to Europe to see if we can infiltrate the headquarters of a multi-billion-dollar corporation and stop them from destroying the goddamn planet. What would you think, I wonder? Assuming you'd even believe such a fantastic tale, what would you think? You'd be proud of me, Dick. She was scarcely aware that she'd spoken aloud, not at all sure if it was the truth. Her father wanted to see her in a less perilous line of work. Compared to what she and the other ex-stars were currently up against, burglary was about as dangerous as accounting. After a long moment, she carefully placed the photo into a pocket of the backpack and looked around at the broken remnants of her small home, still thinking about her father and what he'd say about the strange path her life had taken. If things went well, maybe she'd be able to ask him in person. Rebecca Chambers and the other survivors of the main mission were still in hiding, quietly networking through the S.T.A.R.S organization for support and waiting to hear what she and Chris and Barry could tell them about Umbrella's headquarters. The official HQ was in Austria, although they all suspected that the minds behind the T-virus had their own secret complex elsewhere, which you won't find out if you don't get your ass in here. Guys, everyone think you stopped to take a nap. Jill shouldered the bag and took a final look around the room before moving towards the back door through the kitchen. There was a lingering scent of rotten fruit in the dark air, coming from a bowl of apples and pears on top of the refrigerator that had long since disintegrated into mush. Even though she knew better, the smell caused a chill to run up her spine. She hurried for the closed door, trying to block out the sudden vivid flashes of memory of what they'd found at the Spencer estate. Rotting as they walked, reaching out with wet and withered fingers, faces melted with pus and decay. Jill? She barely contained a cry of surprise at the sound of Chris's soft voice just outside. The door opened, Chris silhouetted against the darkness by a distant streetlight. Yeah, right here. Sorry it took me so long. Umbrella's been through here with a bulldozer. Even in the bare light, she could see the half grin on his boyish face. We were starting to think the zombies got ya. Jill knew he was trying to ease the tension, but couldn't find it in herself to smile back. Too many people had died because of what Umbrella had unleashed in the woods outside of town. The spill had happened closer to Raccoon. Not funny. Chris's grin faded. Yeah, I know. You ready? Jill nodded, although she didn't feel particularly ready for what lay ahead. Then again, she hadn't felt ready for what they were leaving behind either. In a matter of weeks, her concept of reality had undergone a massive shift, turning nightmares into the commonplace. Evil corporations, mad scientists, killer viruses, and the walking dead. Yeah, I'm ready. Together, they stepped outside. As Jill closed the door behind them, she was suddenly struck by a strange and ominous certainty that she would never set foot in the house again. The three of them wouldn't be coming back to Raccoon City at all. But not because something happens to us. Something will happen, but not to us. Frowning, hand on the doorknob, she hesitated for a moment and tried to make sense of the bizarre thought. They survived the recon. They were successful in their fight against Umbrella. Why wouldn't they come back to their homes? She didn't know, but the feeling was uncomfortably strong. Something bad was going to happen. Something... Hey, you okay? Gil looked up at Chris, saw the same concern on his youthful face that she'd noticed earlier. They'd gotten pretty close in the last few weeks, although she suspected that Chris might like to get a little bit closer. And you don't? The sense of impending unpleasantness was already fading, other confusions and uncertainties stepping in to take its place. Jill shook herself mentally and nodded at Chris, letting the feelings go. The flight to New York wasn't going to wait for her to indulge in self-analysis, or to worry about things that she couldn't control, imagined or otherwise. Still, that feeling. Let's get the hell out of here. They moved out into the night, leaving the house dark behind them, as lonely and silent as a tomb. Chapter 2. October 3rd, 1998. Twilight had settled across the mountains, painting the jagged horizon in shades of purple dusk. The winding blacktop snaked through the gathering darkness, surrounded by shadowed hills that towered into the cloudless sky, stretching towards the first faint glimmerings of starlight. Leon might have appreciated the majestic view a bit more if he wasn't so goddamn late. He'd make it to the shift on time, sure, but he'd been hoping to get settled into the new apartment first, take a shower, get something to eat. As it was, he might have time to hit a drive-thru on his way to the station, changing into his uniform back at the last rest stop and saved him a couple of minutes, but basically he was screwed.
Way to go, Officer Kennedy. First day on the job, you'll be picking cheeseburger out of your teeth during roll call. Very professional.
The shift started at 9 and it was already just after 8. Leon let his boot ride a little heavier on the gas, even as the Jeep whipped past the sign that told him he was half an hour away from Raccoon City. At least the road was clear, except for a couple of semis. He hadn't seen anyone for what felt like hours. Nice change considering the traffic tie-up just outside of New York that had cost him most of the afternoon. He'd actually tried to call the night before to leave a message with the desk sergeant that he might be late, but there'd been something wrong with the connection, nothing but a busy signal. What little furniture he had was already moved into a studio apartment in the working class but basically decent trash district of Raccoon City. There was a nice park not 2 blocks away, and was only a 5-minute drive to the station. No more gridlock, no more overcrowded slums or random acts of brutality. Assuming he could survive the embarrassment of showing up to his first shift as a full-blown officer of the law without having unpacked his bags, he was looking forward to living in the peaceful community.
Raccoon is about as far removed from the Big Apple as you can get, thank you very much. Well, except for the last few months. Those murders.
In spite of himself, he felt a tiny thrill at the thought. What had happened in Raccoon was horrible, of course, sickening, but the perps had never been caught and the investigation was really just getting started. And if Irons liked him as much as the heads of the academy had liked him, maybe Leon would get a chance to work on the case. Word had it that Chief Irons was kind of a prick, but Leon knew his training had been top-notch. Even a prick would have to be a little impressed. He'd graduated at the top 10th after all, and it wasn't like he was a stranger to Raccoon City, since he'd spent most of his summers there as a kid when his grandparents were still alive. Back then, the RPD building had been a library, and Umbrella was still several years away from turning the town into an actual city. But in most ways, it was still the same quiet place he remembered from his childhood. Once the cannibal killers were finally put away, Raccoon would be ideal again. Beautiful, clean, a white-collar community nestled in the mountains like a secret paradise.
So I get settled in, and a week or two passes, and Irons notices how well written my reports are, sees how good I am on the target range. He asks me to take a look at the case files, just to familiarize myself with the details so I can do some footwork. And I see something that no one else has seen. A pattern maybe, or a motive or more than one of the victims. Maybe I run across a witness report that reads wrong. No one else is caught because they've lived with it for too long. And this rookie cop just comes along and cracks the case. Not a month out of the academy and Something ran in front of the Jeep. Jesus!
Leon hit the brake and swerved, shocked out of his daydream as he struggled for control of the vehicle. The brakes locked and there was a screech of rubber that sounded like a scream. The Jeep half turned to face the darkening trees that lined the road. It came to a stop on the shoulder, dying after a final lurching jolt. Heart pounding and his stomach in knots, Leon opened the window and craned his neck, scanning the shadows for the animal that had darted across the highway. He hadn't hit it, but it had been close. Some kind of a dog. He didn't get a clear look. A big one anyway. A shepherd or maybe an oversized Doberman. But it looked wrong somehow. He'd only seen it for a split second. Flash of glowing red eyes and lean, wolfish body. And there was something else. It had seemed kind of
slimy? No. Trick of the light. Or you were just so shit scared that you saw it wrong. You're okay, you didn't hit it. That's the important thing. Jesus.
He felt both relieved and suddenly quite angry as the adrenaline leaked out of his system. People who let their dogs run loose were idiots, claiming that they wanted their pets to be free and then acting surprised when Fido got squashed by a car. The Jeep had come to a stop just a few feet away from a road sign that read Raccoon City 10. He could just make out the lettering in the growing shadows. Leon glanced at his watch. Still had almost half an hour to get to the station, plenty of time. But for some reason, he simply sat for a moment, closing his eyes and breathing deeply. Cool pine-scented air breezed across his face, the deserted stretch of road seeming almost unnaturally quiet, as if the landscape was holding its breath, waiting. Now that his heart had resumed a more normal pace, he was surprised to find that he still felt unsettled, even anxious.
The murders in Raccoon. Weren't a few of those people killed by animal attack? Wild dogs or something? Maybe that wasn't someone's pet after all.
A disturbing thought, and even more disturbing was the sudden feeling he had that the dog was still close by, maybe watching him from the darkness in the trees.
Welcome to Raccoon City, Officer Kennedy. Watch out for things that might be watching you.
Don't be an asshole. He felt a little better at the sound of his no-nonsense adult tone of voice. He often wondered if he would ever outgrow his imagination.
Daydreaming like a kid about catching bad guys, then inventing killer dog monsters lurking in the woods. Let's try to act our age, eh, Leon? You're a cop, for God's sake, a grown-up.
He started the engine and backed onto the road, ignoring the strange sense of unease that had somehow managed to take hold of him in spite of his mind's chiding voice. He had a new job and a nice apartment in a nice little up-and-coming city. He was competent, bright, and decent-looking. As long as he kept his creativity glands in check, everything would be fine. And I'm on my way. He forced a grin that felt out of place but suddenly necessary to his peace of mind. He was on his way to Raccoon City, to a promising new life. There was nothing to be uneasy about. Nothing at all. Claire was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, and the fact that her butt had been aching for the last couple of hours wasn't helping much. The thrum of the Harley's engine seemed to have settled deep into her bones, a physical counterpoint to the butterflies in her stomach. And of course, the worst of it seemed to emanate from her extremely sore and overheated ass. Plus, it was getting dark, and like an idiot, she wasn't wearing her leathers. Chris would be totally pissed.
He's going to yell his head off, and I won't even care. God, Chris, please be there to scream at me for being such an idiot.
The Harley buzzed along the dark road, the sound of the engine echoing back at her from the sloping hills and shadow-laden trees. She took the corners carefully, very aware of how deserted the winding highway was. If she took a spill, it could be a long time before anyone happened by.
Like it wouldn't matter. Take a spill without your gear on and they'll be scraping pieces of you off the asphalt with a squeegee.
It was stupid.
She knew it was stupid to have left in such a god-awful hurry that she couldn't be bothered to suit up. But something had happened to Chris. Hell, something may have happened to the entire city. Over the past couple of weeks, the growing suspicion that her brother was in trouble had become a certainty. The call she'd made that morning had cinched it for her. Nobody home. Nobody home anywhere. Like Raccoon moved and forgot to leave a forwarding address. It was definitely creepy, although she could give a shit about Raccoon. What mattered was that Chris was there, and if something bad had happened to him, she wouldn't think that way. Chris was all she had left. Their father had been killed on a construction job when they were both still kids, and when their mother had died in a car crash 3 years ago, Chris had done his best to take on a parental role. Even though he was only a few years older, he'd helped her pick a college, find a decent therapist. He even sent her a little money each month beyond what the insurance policies paid out, what he called walking around cash. And on top of all that, he called her every couple of weeks like clockwork. Except he hadn't called at all in the last month and a half, and hadn't returned any of her calls. She'd tried to convince herself that she was silly to worry. Maybe he'd finally met a girl, or something had turned up on the S.T.A.R.S suspension thing, whatever that was about. But after 3 unanswered letters and days of waiting for the phone to ring, she'd finally put in a call to the RPD that very afternoon, hoping against hope that someone there might know what was going on. She'd gotten a busy signal. Sitting in her dorm room, listening to that soulless mechanical bleat, she'd started to worry for real. Even a small city like Raccoon had a voicemail answering system set up to field calls. The rational part of her mind told her not to panic, that a down line was nothing to get freaky about, but already her emotional self was screaming foul. She'd gone through her address book with trembling hands, dialing the few numbers she had for friends of his, people or places he told her to call if there was ever an emergency and he wasn't at home. Barry Burton, Emmy's Diner, some cop she'd never met named David Ford. She even tried Billy Rabbitson's number, although Chris had told her that he disappeared a few months earlier. And with the exception of an overloaded answering machine at David Ford's house, she'd gotten nothing but busy signals. By the time she'd hung up, the worry had transformed into something close to panic. The trip to Raccoon City was only about 6.5 hours from the university. Claire's roommate had borrowed her riding gear to go out with her new biker boyfriend, but Claire had an extra helmet, and with that feeling that was not quite panic spinning through her frightened thoughts, she had simply grabbed the helmet and gone. Stupid, maybe. Impulsive, definitely. And if Chris is okay, we can laugh about how ridiculously paranoid I am till the cows come home. But until I find out what's going on, I won't know a moment's peace. The last of the day's light was draining from the strip of cloudless sky above, although a waxing nearly full moon and the Softail's headlight gave her enough light to see by. More than enough to see the small sign ahead on her left, Raccoon City 10. Telling herself that Chris was fine, that if anything weird had happened in Raccoon, somebody would have checked it out by now. Claire forced her concentration back to handling the heavy bike. It would be full dark soon, but she'd be in Raccoon before it was too dark to ride safely. Whether or not Raccoon City would be safe, she'd find out soon enough. Chapter 3. Leon reached the outskirts of town with 20 minutes to spare, but decided that a hot dinner was going to have to wait. From his previous visits to the station, he knew that there were a couple of vending machines he could hit up for something to tide him over. The thought of stale candy and peanuts didn't sit well on his growing stomach, but it was his own damn fault for not taking New York traffic into account. The driving to the city proper did a lot to soothe his still rattled nerves. He passed the few small farms that lay east of town, the fairgrounds, the storage sheds, and finally the truck stop that marked the separation of rural Raccoon from urban. Something about knowing that he was going to be patrolling those back roads before long, keeping them safe, gave him a surprising sense of well-being and not a little pride. The early autumn air from the open window was pleasantly brisk, and the rising moon bathed everything he saw in a silvery glow. He wasn't going to be late after all. Within the hour, he'd officially become one of Raccoon City's finest. As Leon turned the Jeep down Bybee, heading for one of the main north-south streets that would take him to the RPD building, He got his first hint that something was very wrong. In the first few blocks, he was mildly surprised. By the fifth, he found himself slipping towards a state of shock. It wasn't just strange, it was impossible. Bybee was the first real city street, coming from the east, where buildings outnumbered empty lots. There were several espresso bars and cheap diners, as well as a bargain movie theater that never seemed to run anything but horror movies and sexy comedies, and was therefore the most popular hangout for the youth of Raccoon. There were even a few generically hip taverns that served microbrew and hot rum drinks for the winter college student ski crowd. At 8:45 on a Saturday night, Bybee should have been teeming with life. But of the mostly single or two-story brick shops and restaurants that lined the street, Leon saw that almost all were dark. And in the few that still boasted some light, it didn't look like there was anyone inside. There were plenty of cars parked along the narrow street, and yet not one person that he could see. Bybee, the hangout for cruising teens and college students, was totally deserted.
Where the hell is everybody?
His mind grasped for answers as he crept down the silent street, searching desperately for a reason, and for some way to alleviate the sweaty anxiety that had once again settled over him. Maybe there was some kind of an event going on, a church function like a spaghetti feed, or perhaps Raccoon had decided to take up Oktoberfest and tonight was the big kickoff.
Yeah, but everybody at the same time? It'd have to be one hell of a party.
It was then that Leon realized he also hadn't seen a single car on the road since he'd had that scare with the dog 10 miles out of town. Not one. And with that thoroughly unsettling realization came the next. Less dramatic, but distinctly more immediate. Something smelled bad. In fact, something smelled like shit.
Jeez, that skunk. And apparently it threw up on itself before dying.
He'd already slowed the Jeep to a crawl and had planned to take a left on Powell, just a block ahead. But that horrible smell and the total absence of life were giving him a serious case of the creeps. Maybe he should stop and check things out, look around for some sign of... Oh, hey! Leon grinned, relief flooding through his confusion. There were a couple of people standing at the corner, practically right in front of him. The streetlight was out on their side, but he could see them in the silhouette clear enough. A couple, a woman in a skirt and a big man wearing work boots. As he got closer, he could see by the way that they moved, heading south on Powell, they had to be monumentally drunk. Both of them staggered to the shadows cast by the office supply store and out of sight. But he was going in the direction anyway. No harm in stopping to ask what was going on, was there?
Must have come out of O'Kelly's. I know too many, but as long as they're not driving anywhere, fine by me. And I'm going to feel stupid when they tell me that tonight's a big free concert or the all-you-can-eat town barbecue.
Almost giddy with relief, Leon turned the corner and squinted into the heavy shadows, looking for the pair. He didn't see them, but there was an alley tucked between the supply store and a jewelry shop. Maybe his two drunk friends had ducked in for a bathroom break, or something even less legal. Shit! Leon slammed on the brake as a half-dozen dark shapes fluttered up from the street, caught in the Jeep's headlights like giant whirling leaves. Startled, it took him a second to realize he was seeing birds. They didn't cry out, although he was close enough to hear the brushing of dry wings as they took off to the air. Crows, enjoying a late-night feast of roadkill. What looked like...
Oh my god.
There was a human body in the middle of the road, 20 feet in front of the Jeep. Face down, but it looked like a woman. Judging from the liquid red stains that covered most of the once white blouse, it wasn't some beer-happy college student who decided to take a nap in the wrong place.
Hit and run. Some bastard hit her and then drove away. Jesus, what a mess.
Leon killed the engine and was half out the door before his racing thoughts caught up to him. He hesitated, one foot on the asphalt, the stench of death heavy in the cool, still air. His mind had latched onto an idea that he didn't want to consider, but knew he had better. This wasn't some training exercise, this was his life.
What if it's not a hit and run? What if there's no one around because some psycho gunman decided on a little target practice? Everyone could be inside, laying low. Maybe the RPD's on the way. Maybe those drunks were drunk. They could have been shot and were trying to get help.
He leaned back into the Jeep and fumbled under the passenger seat for his graduation gift, the Desert Eagle 50 AE Magnum with a custom 10-inch barrel, Israeli export. His father and uncle, both cops, had gone in together on it. Not standard issue for the RPD, in fact much more powerful. Leon grabbed a clip from the glove box and slapped it in, feeling the solid weight of the weapon in his slightly unsteady hands. He decided it was the best present he'd ever received. He stuffed 2 more clips into a belt pouch on general principle. Each only held 6 rounds. Pointing the loaded Magnum at the ground, he stepped out of the Jeep and took a quick look at his surroundings. He wasn't all that familiar with Raccoon at night, but he knew that it shouldn't be as dark as it was. Several of the streetlights farther along Powell were either shot out or simply not on, and the shadows past the blood-soaked body were thick. Not for the Jeep's headlights, he wouldn't even have been able to see that. He edged forward, feeling horribly exposed as he left the relative cover of the Jeep, but aware that she could still be alive. It didn't seem likely, but he had to at least check. A few steps closer and he could see that it was definitely a young woman. Lank red hair obscured the face, but the clothes were right, denim pedal pushers and flats. The wounds were mostly hidden by the bloody shirt, but there seemed to be dozens. Ragged holes in the wet cloth exposed torn, glistening flesh and the crimson of muscle beneath. Swallowing heavily, Leon quickly switched the gun to his left hand and crouched down next to her. Cool, clammy skin yielded easily beneath his fingertips as he touched her throat. Pressing his first 2 fingers against it, carotid. A few seconds passed, seconds that made him feel horribly young and afraid as he tried to remember the procedure for CPR, prayed at the same time that he would feel a pulse.
5 compressions. 2 short breaths. Keep my elbows locked. Come on. Please don't be dead.
He couldn't find it and didn't want to wait 1 more second. He tucked the Magnum into his belt and grabbed her shoulders to turn her over, to check for breathing. But as he started to lift, he saw something that made him lay her down again, his heart a twisting knot in his chest. The victim's shirt had pulled out of her pants enough for him to see that her spine and part of her ribcage were exposed, still fleshy knobs of vertebrae shining and red, the narrow, curving ribs disappearing into the masses of shredded tissue. It was like she'd been knocked down and chewed on. Information that Leon had disregarded as unimportant suddenly registered, and even as a few facts that he had clicked into place, he felt the first inky tendrils of real fear slither into his mind.
Crows couldn't have done this. Would have taken him hours. Who the hell ever heard of crows flocking after dark to eat? And that shit smell. It's not coming from her. She died recently and... Cannibal. Murders.
No. No way. For that to happen, for a person to have been killed and then partially devoured on a city street with no one to stop it,
and with enough time to pass for scavengers to come. For that to happen, killers would have had to slaughter most if not all of the population. Doesn't seem likely? Fine. And what's that smell? Where is everyone?
Behind Leon, there was a low, soft groan, a shuffling footstep, and another, a wet sound. It took him barely a second to stand and turn, hand instinctively snatching for the Magnum. It was the couple, the drunks, staggering towards him. They'd been joined by a third, a beefy-looking guy with blood all over his shirt, and his hands, and dripping out of his mouth, a rubbery red mouth set into his pasty, rotting face like an open sore. The other man, the big man with the work boots and suspenders, looked much the same. The V of the blonde woman's pink blouse revealed cleavage that was spotted with darkness, with what appeared to be mold. The trio stumbled towards him, past his jeep, raising pale hands they emitted moaning, hungry wails. Some dark fluid gurgled out of the beefy man's nose and ran across his moving lips. Leon was overwhelmed by the understanding that the terrible, shitty smell was decayed flesh, and it was coming from them. And there was another one, stepping out from a door stoop across the street, a young woman in a stained t-shirt, hair tied back from a slack and mindless face. A groan behind him. Leon shot a look over his shoulder and saw a youth with dark hair and rotting arms shamble out from the sidewalk darkness of an awning shadow.
Leon raised the magnum and aimed at the closest, the man with the suspenders, while his instinct screamed at him to run. He was terrified, but his trained logic continued to insist that there was an explanation for what he was seeing, that he was not looking at the Walking Dead.
Control. Procedure. You're a cop.
Alright, that's far enough. Don't move! His voice was strong, commanding, and authoritative, and he was wearing his uniform. God, why wouldn't they stop? The man's suspenders moaned again, blind to the weapon pointed at his chest, and still flanked by the others, now less than 10 feet away. Don't move! The sound of his own panic made him back up a step, darting his gaze left and right, seeing that there were still more of the wailing, lurching people coming out of the shadows. Something grabbed his ankle. No! He whipped the gun around and saw that the corpse of the hit-and-run victim was scrabbling at his boot with one blood-crusted hand, working to drag her crippled body closer. Her gasping cry of frantic hunger rose to join those of the others. She tried to bite into his foot, bloody smears of saliva drooling off her abraded chin, dripping onto his leather. Leon fired into her upper back, the sharp, explosive crack of the massive weapon loosening her grip, and at such close range, probably obliterating her heart. Fathoming, she dropped back to the pavement, and he turned and saw that the others were less than 5 feet away, and he fired twice more, the round splattering red flowers into the chest of the closest. The entry wound spouted scarlet. The man in suspenders was hardly fazed by the twin gaping holes in his torso, his stagger faltering for only a second. He opened his bloody mouth and gasped out a hissing mewl of hunger, hands raised again as if to direct him to the source of relief.
Must be on something. Firepower like that could drop an elephant.
Backing away, Leon fired again, and again, and again, and then the empty clattered to the pavement. Another was slammed in, more rounds fired. And still they kept coming, oblivious to the shots that ripped at their stinking flesh. It was a bad dream, a bad movie, it wasn't real. Leon knew that if he didn't start believing, he was going to die. Eaten alive by these...
Go ahead, Kennedy. Say it. These zombies.
Blocked from his jeep, Leon stumbled away, still firing.